She stopped at the window of a luxurious boutique, a poor girl, staring at a shoe she could never afford. But what she didn't know, someone powerful was watching, and that glance would change her life forever. The city lights flickered against the glass as people hurried past, heels clicking, laughter echoing, dreams colliding in the evening air. Among them walked Ella James, a 23-year-old woman with gentle eyes and shoes that had long lost their shine. She worked as a cleaner in a small pastry shop, where the warm smell of coffee and sugar often made her forget her worries for a while. Every evening, after wiping the last table and folding her apron, Ella took the same route home. Not because it was faster, but because of one shop she could never stop looking at. It was Maison Leclerc, the most luxurious fashion boutique in town. Its window displays were a world of elegance, sparkling jewelry, silk gowns that shimmered under the lights, and shoes so beautiful they looked like art. And every night Ella slowed her steps, letting her tired eyes rest on that world behind the glass. A world that seemed close enough to touch, yet far enough to remain a dream. But Ella only had eyes for one thing, a pair of shoes sitting on a glass pedestal. They were cream-colored designer heels with a soft golden bow and a crystal pin on the side. To others, they were just shoes. But to her, they were a dream stitched in leather. Every day she stopped there. Her reflection appeared beside them. Tired eyes, second-hand dress, old sneakers, and she would smile softly and whisper, "One day. Maybe." She never entered the store. She knew her salary could barely pay for a single lace on those shoes. But still, she came. Just to look. Just to imagine. That night, as drizzle fell on the pavement, Ella stood at the window again, clutching her broken umbrella, the glass fogged with her breath as she looked at the shoes one more time. Across the street, a man in a sleek black car watched her quietly. Adrian Cole, 34, billionaire owner of Cole Enterprises, sat in silence, his phone forgotten in his hand. He had seen people buy things they didn't need every day. But never had he seen someone admire something with such pure longing. There was something in her eyes, soft, sincere, untouched by greed. As she turned to leave, walking through puddles with soaked shoes, Adrian found himself whispering, "Who is she?" He didn't know it yet, but that single question would change both their lives forever. Adrian Cole had seen thousands of faces in his life. Employees, investors, celebrities, models. But none of them stayed in his mind the way that girl's face did. That night, even after his car drove away, her image refused to fade. He could still see the way she looked at the shoes. Not with greed, but with a quiet kind of wonder, as if they held a piece of her dream. He sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights stretching endlessly below him. The night was silent, too silent. He poured himself a glass of water and opened his laptop filled with business reports. But the words didn't make sense. His mind kept going back to her, the girl standing in the rain, clutching a broken umbrella, eyes full of hope. Who was she? And why did she seem so familiar? There was something about her that reminded him of his late mother, Grace Cole, a woman who had taught him everything about kindness and humility before the world turned him into a billionaire. Her voice echoed in his mind. "Never judge people by their clothes, Adrian. The purest hearts are often hidden behind the simplest things." He hadn't thought about those words in years, not until that rainy night. By morning, Adrian made a decision that even he didn't fully understand. As his car drove toward his office, he turned to his personal assistant. "Daniel, find out who that girl is," he said calmly. Daniel looked puzzled. "Which girl, sir?" "The one who stops by Maison Leclerc every evening," Adrian replied. "She stands by the window, looking at a pair of shoes." Daniel hesitated but nodded. "All right, sir, I'll check." The day went on like any other. Meetings, calls, contracts. But Adrian's mind wasn't in any of them. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her again. The rain, the light, the longing. By noon, Daniel returned, holding a thin folder. "Sir," he said, Her name is Ella James. She works as a cleaner at Sweet Bean Pastry Cafe and lives in an old apartment near the edge of the city. She walks home around 6 every evening. Adrian leaned back in his chair, whispering her name softly. Ella. He smiled faintly, as if the sound of it stirred something gentle inside him. Daniel tilted his head. Do you know her, sir? Adrian looked out the window, his voice calm but thoughtful. No, but I think I meant to. That evening, Adrian skipped his usual dinner meetings and drove straight to Maison Leclerc. The boutique was already closed, but its light still glowed softly, bathing the window display in warm gold. The shoes were still there, elegant, untouched, waiting. He parked quietly across the street, his headlights off. The rain had turned into a gentle drizzle, the kind that made the city look like a painting. Adrian leaned back in his seat, eyes fixed on the glass display. He didn't know exactly why he came, only that something had drawn him there. He whispered to himself, let's see where destiny leads. And as if the night had heard his words, Ella appeared again. She walked through the drizzle, holding her small umbrella close. When she reached the boutique, she stopped. Just like before, for a moment she stood perfectly still, her reflection merging with the glowing glass. Then, softly, she smiled. The same quiet, wistful smile she always gave the shoes. Her eyes sparkled with a kind of admiration that was almost childlike. Gentle, pure, full of longing and hope. She didn't touch the glass or sigh. She simply looked, as if she were speaking to a dream only she could understand. Inside his car, Adrian watched her closely, his heart tightening without warning. Seeing her again, the way she stared at those shoes with quiet wonder, stirred something deep in him. She wasn't admiring them like someone chasing status or wealth. It was something deeper. A silent wish, a private promise to herself. He found himself studying every small detail. The way her wet hair clung to her cheek, the way she bit her lips slightly as she gazed, the way her shoulders relaxed for just a second, as if in front of that window, she could finally breathe. Adrian didn't know her story, but in that quiet moment he felt as if he did. He smiled faintly and whispered almost to himself, there's something special about you. Outside, Ella turned to leave, her steps light, but her gaze lingering one last time on the shoes before she disappeared into the misty street. Adrian sat in silence, eyes following her until she was gone. He whispered her name softly. Ella James. He had only seen her twice, yet somehow she had already taken a quiet place in his thoughts. And one thing was certain. His life would never be the same again. The next morning came quietly for Ella. The city was already awake when she left her small apartment. The sound of buses, honking cars, and the smell of fried bread filled the air. She wore her usual outfit, a faded blue dress, and a light scarf to hide the tiny tear on her shoulder. At the cafe, she worked with her usual care, wiping tables, greeting customers with a tired but genuine smile, and humming softly as she arranged pastries on trays. Her co-workers often teased her for always daydreaming. Ella, said her friend Ruth, one day your dreams will follow you home. Ella only smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. Maybe, she said quietly. Around noon, when the cafe was half full, a tall man in a dark gray suit walked in. He wasn't a regular. His presence turned heads instantly. Confident posture, calm steps, and an air of quiet power. But his eyes were kind, curious. He looked around before walking straight to the counter. Excuse me, he said to the cashier. Is Miss Ella James here? Ella froze when she heard her name. She turned slowly, her cleaning cloth still in hand. I'm Ella, she said softly, unsure. The man smiled politely and handed her a white envelope. This is for you, miss. I was asked to deliver it personally. She blinked in confusion. Who sent it? I'm afraid I don't know, he replied. My job was just to make sure it reached you. Before she could ask more, he turned and left, his polished shoes clicking against the tiled floor. Ruth rushed over instantly. Girl, what's that? Ella stared at the envelope in her trembling hands. It had no stamp, no logo. Just her name written in fine cursive letters. She opened it carefully. Inside was a small card with neat handwriting that read, "Meet me at Maison Leclerc today by 5 p.m. Come as you are." There was no name, no signature. Ruth gasped. "Are you serious? That's mysterious." Ella bit her lip. What if it's a prank? Or what if it's not? Ruth said, eyes wide. "You've got to go. What's the worst that could happen?" Ella's heart raced. The handwriting looked elegant. Not something a prankster would write. She couldn't focus for the rest of the day. Her thoughts ran wild. By 4:30, she washed her hands, changed into her simple floral dress, and fixed her scarf neatly. Her hands shook slightly as she looked in the mirror. She whispered to her reflection, "Whatever happens, I'll just go and see." And with that, Ella stepped out, not knowing that her life was about to change forever. The evening sun hung low, painting the streets in soft shades of gold and rose. Ella's heart beat faster with every step she took toward the boutique. The glass walls of Maison Leclerc glowed like a dream as she drew closer. She had never dared to go near the door before. She always watched from across the street. But today was different. Someone had called her here, and the mystery tugged at her heart stronger than fear. When she reached the entrance, she paused. Her palms were damp, and her stomach twisted with nervousness. "Just breathe," she whispered to herself, adjusting her scarf. Then she saw him. A tall man stood by the glass door, his hands tucked into his pockets. He wore a simple but elegant gray suit that seemed made just for him. His presence drew quiet attention. People walking by slowed down just to look. But his eyes weren't proud or cold. They were gentle, curious, and somehow familiar. "Miss Ella James?" he asked softly. She nodded hesitantly. "Yes, that's me." He smiled. "Good. I was afraid you wouldn't come." Ella frowned slightly. "You sent the letter?" "Yes," he replied. "My name is Adrian Cole." Her eyes widened. She had heard that name before. Every newspaper in the city had written about him. The billionaire who built half the skyscrapers in town. "You're the owner of Cole Enterprises?" she stammered. He nodded slowly. "Yes, but today I'm just Adrian." Ella blinked, confusion clouding her face. I don't understand. Why me?" Adrian glanced toward the boutique window. The golden lights shimmered over the very shoes she admired every night. "Yesterday I saw you standing here," he said quietly. "You were looking at those shoes like they were the most precious thing in the world." Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Oh, I didn't mean to cause any trouble, You didn't," he interrupted gently. "You reminded me of something I had forgotten. How to see beauty in simple things." He turned to the boutique manager who had been waiting nearby. "Wrap those shoes, please," he said firmly. Ella's eyes widened. "No, sir, please don't. I can't accept that." Adrian looked at her calmly. "It's not charity, Ella. It's a gift. A reminder that some dreams are meant to be reached." Her voice trembled. "Why would you buy me something so expensive? You don't even know me." He smiled faintly. "Because once I knew someone who looked at life the way you do. My mother. She had kind eyes like yours." Ella's throat tightened as tears filled her eyes. She wanted to speak, but no words came. When the manager returned with the box wrapped in gold ribbon, Adrian gently placed it in her hands. "Don't thank me," he said softly. "Just promise me one thing. When you wear them, walk like the world finally noticed you." Ella stood there frozen, her fingers trembling as she held the golden box. The glow from the boutique lights made the ribbon shimmer, but her eyes were blurred with tears. She couldn't remember the last time someone had done something kind for her, especially something this grand. "I can't take this," she whispered again, her voice breaking. "It's too much." Adrian shook his head slowly. "Sometimes the things that feel too much are the ones we deserve the most." She looked down, struggling to steady her voice. "But you don't even know me. I'm just a cleaner." He gave a soft smile. "Titles don't define worth, Ella. Hearts do, and yours speaks louder than you think." Her throat tightened. It had been so long since anyone had spoken kindly to her. Her life had been filled with being ignored. By customers, by neighbors, by the world. Yet this man, whose shoes probably cost more than her rent, looked at her as if she mattered. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging the box gently to her chest. "I don't know what to say." "You already said it," he replied quietly. "Just promise me you'll wear them one day. Not because they're beautiful, but because you are." Ella couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They streamed down her face, soft and silent. Adrian handed her a white handkerchief. "No tears tonight," he said with a faint chuckle. "This is supposed to be a happy moment." She wiped her eyes, laughing weakly through the tears. "I'm sorry. It's just... no one's ever done something like this for me before." Adrian looked at her, and for the first time in years, he felt something warm stir inside him. A peace he hadn't known since his mother died. "Then maybe tonight is the start of something new," he said softly. They stood there for a moment, the city moving around them. Cars honking, people laughing, rain beginning to fall again in tiny drops. But to Ella, the world had gone quiet. All she could hear was her heartbeat and the words that had just changed her world. When she finally turned to leave, Adrian called after her. "Ella!" She looked back. He smiled. "Dreams don't always stay behind glass." She nodded, her voice trembling. "I'll remember that." As she walked home, the golden box in her arms felt like she was carrying sunlight. She didn't know if she'd ever see Adrian again, but for the first time in years, hope walked beside her. That night, as she set the box gently on her small bed, Ella whispered into the quiet, "Thank you for seeing me." In his penthouse high above the city, Adrian watched the rain trace down the glass. Somewhere out there, he knew she was smiling. And for the first time in years, his heart felt light. Morning came softly, with golden sunlight slipping through the thin curtains of Ella's tiny room. She had barely slept. Each time she closed her eyes, the memory of last night replayed. The moment Adrian handed her the box, the sound of his voice when he said she deserved it. For the first time in years, she woke up smiling. She sat up and looked at the box again. The golden ribbon still gleamed, untouched. Her fingers hovered over it, then stopped. "Not yet," she thought. "I'll open it when I'm ready." She got ready for work, tying her scarf neatly and slipping into her worn shoes. Before leaving, she whispered to the box, "Stay safe, my little dream." At the cafe, her friend Ruth noticed the glow in her eyes right away. "Okay, spill it," Ruth said, raising an eyebrow. "You look like someone who found treasure." Ella laughed shyly. "Maybe I did." "You mean that mystery letter worked out?" Ella hesitated, glancing around. "Yes, but Ruth, it's unbelievable. A man, Adrian Cole, the billionaire. He bought me the shoes." Ruth nearly dropped the coffee pot. "Wait, the Adrian Cole? Are you serious?" Ella nodded slowly. "He said I reminded him of someone. He was kind. But I still don't understand why." Ruth's eyes widened. "Girl, that's not luck. That's destiny knocking on your door." Ella chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Maybe. But all I want is to thank him properly, not just with words." All day her mind worked quietly on that thought. What could a cleaner possibly give to a billionaire? Then it came to her. Something simple, something honest, something from the heart. That evening when she returned home, she baked. Her small kitchen filled with the sweet smell of butter and sugar. She had no fancy ingredients, no expensive wrapping paper. But she poured her gratitude into every cookie she shaped. By morning she had 4 perfect butter cookies, wrapped carefully in a plain paper bag. She dressed neatly, took a deep breath, and boarded a bus she had never taken before. One that stopped near the tall glass tower of Cole Enterprises. When she stepped into the lobby, her heart pounded. Marble floors, shining walls, people in suits. She felt invisible again. But she walked up to the front desk and said softly, "Good morning. I'm here to see Mr. Adrian Cole. Please, I only need 5 minutes." The receptionist blinked. surprised by her calm voice and quiet confidence. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Ella said, holding the little paper bag close. "But I have something more important. A thank you." The receptionist hesitated for a moment, glancing at Ella's kind but nervous face. Something about her tone, humble yet sincere, made the woman pause. She picked up the phone and spoke quietly. "Mr. Cole, there's a Miss Ella James here to see you. She says it's important." There was a short silence, then a reply Ella couldn't hear. The receptionist smiled faintly. "Please have a seat. Someone will come for you shortly." Ella sat on the edge of the leather chair, clutching the small paper bag tightly in her hands. Her knees trembled. What was she even doing here? This building looked like a palace of glass and power. Not a place for someone like her. Just then, a man in a navy blue suit walked up to her. He had warm eyes and a calm voice. "Miss James, I'm Daniel, Mr. Cole's assistant. Please, follow me." The elevator ride felt endless. The city grew smaller below her feet. She tried to breathe slowly, rehearsing what she would say, but her mind went blank. When the doors opened, Daniel led her into a large office filled with sunlight and soft music playing in the background. Adrian stood by the window, his hands in his pockets, looking out at the skyline. When he turned around and saw her, his expression softened instantly. "Ella," he said with a gentle smile. "You came?" "Yes," she managed to say, her voice shaky. "I wanted to thank you. Not just for the shoes, but for how you spoke to me. For seeing me." Adrian walked toward her slowly. "You didn't need to come all the way here just for that." She shook her head and held out the small bag with both hands. "I brought this. It's not much, but I made them myself." He took the paper bag as if it were something fragile and precious. "Homemade butter cookies?" She nodded shyly. "Yes, my way of saying thank you." Adrian smiled, a real warm smile that reached his eyes. "Then it's already the best gift I've ever received." He placed the bag on his desk and walked to a nearby shelf. "There's something I'd like to show you, too," he said, taking out a small silver box. Ella tilted her head curiously. "What's that?" He set it gently on the desk and turned a tiny key. Soft music filled the room. A delicate tune, gentle and sweet. "This was my mother's music box," he said quietly. "She used to play it every night before bed. When I saw you by that window, I remembered her." Ella's eyes softened. "She must have been a wonderful woman." "She was," he said, smiling faintly. "And I think she would have liked you." Silence wrapped around them, broken only by the music's tender melody. And in that quiet space, two hearts, one rich, one simple, found something money could never buy. The gentle melody from the music box filled the air, wrapping the room in warmth. Ella sat quietly, her hands folded on her lap, her heart softening with every note. She could tell that the memory behind that tune meant more to Adrian than words could explain. He leaned slightly against the edge of his desk, his eyes lost in the sound. "My mother's name was Grace," he said softly. "She was everything this world forgot to appreciate. Kind, patient, and full of hope. We didn't have much growing up. She worked nights at a laundry shop and spent her days mending clothes for neighbors." Ella listened, her eyes gentle. She could almost picture a woman like that. Tired hands, warm eyes, and a smile that didn't break even when life did. Adrian continued, his voice lower now, as if speaking to the air. "Every Saturday, she'd walk me through a small second-hand market. There was a pair of silver shoes displayed in one of the stalls. She'd stop and stare at them for a few minutes every week. She never tried them on. She just looked at them and said, 'Maybe one day.'" Ella swallowed hard, her throat tightening. "When I got my first real job," Adrian went on, "the first thing I did was run back to that market. I wanted to surprise her, to finally buy the shoes she dreamed of. But the shop had closed. And 2 months later—" He paused, eyes glistening. "So did she." Ella pressed a hand to her chest. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. He gave a faint, broken smile. "That's life, isn't it? We think we have time, until we don't. I built everything after that. The company, the buildings, the fortune. But somewhere along the line, I stopped seeing the beauty she taught me to see. He looked at her then. Really looked. Last week when I saw you standing in the rain, looking at those shoes. It felt like the world gave me a second chance. To be on time for something that matters. Ella's eyes shimmered. You were, she said quietly. You were right on time. The words seemed to rest on him like a prayer. For a long moment they just sat there, listening to the music fade. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, full of peace. Adrian finally smiled and picked up the paper bag she had brought. May I? She nodded. Of course. He took a bite of one cookie, then closed his eyes. Delicious, he said softly. You just reminded me what home tastes like. And in that instant, Ella realized something powerful. Sometimes the richest gift we can give isn't money, but a memory that heals. The soft afternoon light poured through the tall glass windows of Adrian's office, bathing everything in a golden hue. For a moment, neither he nor Ella spoke. The world outside carried on, cars honking, phones ringing, people rushing. But in that room, time seemed to stand still. Adrian set the music box gently on his desk, still holding the last crumb of her butter cookie between his fingers. You know, he said quietly, I can't remember the last time I sat and talked like this. No meetings, no business talk. Just being human. Ella smiled faintly. Maybe you just needed the right reason. He looked at her, his gaze thoughtful. Maybe I did. She turned toward the window, her reflection blending with the skyline. Your view is beautiful, she whispered. It feels like the world is beneath your feet. Adrian followed her eyes. It is. But sometimes when you spend too long up here, you forget what it feels like to stand on the ground. Ella glanced at him, understanding in her eyes. Then maybe it's time you came back down. Her words were soft, but they struck something deep inside him. Something real. He smiled. That sounds like a promise. Then let it be one, she said gently. He chuckled under his breath. All right, then here's mine. If you'll promise to wear those shoes one day, not for anyone else, not for the world, but for yourself. Ella hesitated, looking down at her hands. I don't know if I'll ever have a reason to wear something so fine. You will, he said, his tone firm but kind. Because people like you always find reasons to shine, even in the darkest corners. She met his eyes then, and something wordless passed between them. An understanding, quiet but powerful. Two souls from different worlds, bound by the same loneliness and the same longing for meaning. Ella smiled faintly and said, I should go now. I've already taken enough of your time. He shook his head. No, Ella. You've given me back something time took away. She smiled shyly, clutching her bag. If you ever want a break from the glass towers, you could stop by the cafe. We serve good coffee. He grinned. Then I'll come, but only if you promise to bring those cookies again. Ella laughed, the sound light and pure. Deal. As she walked toward the door, Adrian called out, Ella! She turned. Yes? He gestured toward the window. Next time you look at the city, don't see how high others are standing. See how far you've already come. Her eyes softened. I will. And as she stepped into the elevator, she felt lighter, as though her world, once small and gray, had just found its first shade of gold. 3 days passed, and Ella still couldn't stop replaying that afternoon in her mind. The music box, his quiet voice, the story about his mother. It all felt like something from a dream she didn't want to wake from. She had promised him coffee, half believing he'd never come. Men like Adrian Cole didn't just walk into small cafes run by people like her. But destiny has a way of keeping promises. It was Friday afternoon at Sweet Bean Cafe. The air smelled of cinnamon and roasted coffee beans, and soft jazz music played from an old radio. Ella was behind the counter, wiping cups when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up and froze. Adrian Cole stood there. No suit jacket, no tie. Just a crisp white shirt with sleeves rolled at his elbows and a quiet smile that seemed to belong in another life. The few customers present looked up in shock, whispering among themselves. "Mr. Cole?" Ella said, her heart racing. He smiled. "I told you I'd come for the coffee, and maybe a cookie, if there's any left." She laughed nervously. "You really came?" "I said I would," he replied simply. "I keep my promises." Ella led him to a table by the window, the same one where sunlight poured in at this hour. She placed 2 steaming cups and a plate of butter cookies between them. "I hope it's not too ordinary for your taste," she teased. As they sipped their coffee, their conversation flowed easily. About small things, about childhood, about dreams. Ella told him she wanted to open her own little pastry shop someday, where every item would have a story. Adrian listened with genuine interest, his eyes never leaving hers. When she laughed, he realized it was the first time he'd truly enjoyed silence. The kind that didn't demand, only comforted. He chuckled. Ordinary. He looked around at the cozy space, the soft chatter, the laughter, the warmth of it all. This feels more real than any boardroom I've ever been in. The sun began to set outside, painting the street in amber and rose. Adrian looked down at his cup and said quietly, "My mother used to say, when life gives you music, don't just listen, dance." Ella smiled. "Then maybe we should." He looked up, surprised. She extended her hand playfully. "No music, no rules. Just dance." Adrian laughed softly, stood and took her hand. In the middle of the small cafe, among the smell of coffee and sugar, the billionaire and the cleaner danced. Slow, clumsy, and absolutely perfect. And in that moment, both realized something they hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The cafe grew still as the last few customers watched in quiet amazement. The billionaire and the cafe girl moved gently in the small space between tables. There was no music now, only the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant sound of rain tapping softly against the window. Ella's hand rested lightly on Adrian's shoulder, her other hand in his. She couldn't help but laugh softly. "I think I'm stepping on your shoes," she whispered. He smiled. "They'll survive." They moved slowly, unsure and a little awkward at first, but soon the moment carried them. There was no difference between rich and poor now, only 2 people finding comfort in a world that had often been too loud for kindness. Adrian looked at her with quiet intensity. "You know, Ella," he said softly, "I've attended hundreds of grand events, charity balls, award nights, galas filled with the richest people in this city. But this," he paused, his voice gentling, "this is the most beautiful evening I've had in years." Ella blinked, her throat tightening. "Why me, Adrian? Out of everyone you could have noticed. Why me?" He hesitated, then spoke honestly. "Because you didn't look at those shoes with greed. You looked at them the way my mother used to look at life, with gratitude, even when she had little. You reminded me what sincerity looks like." Her eyes shimmered. "I thought nobody saw me that day. I was just standing there dreaming quietly, like I always do." He shook his head. "The world needs more people who dream quietly." For a long moment they just stood there, close enough to hear each other's breaths. The cafe's lights flickered gently, and the world outside slowed down. Finally, Adrian spoke again, his voice low but steady. "Ella, meeting you reminded me what it feels like to care again. For years I built walls made of glass and steel. But you—" He paused, searching for the right words. "You walked right through them." She felt tears sting her eyes. "You gave me more than a gift," she whispered. "You gave me belief again. Belief that I could be seen, that I mattered." He brushed away a tear from her cheek, his touch gentle. "You do matter. More than you think." The rain grew heavier outside, washing the streets clean. Inside, they stood in silence, two hearts speaking what words could not. When the moment ended, Ella looked down shyly. "Maybe we should sit before Ruth comes back and faints," she said with a soft laugh. Hadrian smiled. "She'd probably start charging an entry fee for anyone who wants to see the billionaire dance." They both laughed, and for the first time in a long while, Hadrian Cole didn't feel like a man made of marble and money. He felt alive, because a girl with nothing had given him everything he didn't know he was missing. As the rain continued outside, the cafe grew quieter. The few remaining customers left, and soon it was just Ella and Adrian, sitting by the window, with empty cups and soft smiles that refused to fade. The city lights reflected through the glass, painting their faces in gold and silver. For a long while, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. The kind that feels safe, where words are no longer needed. Hadrian broke it first. "Ella," he said gently, "there's something I want to show you." He reached into his pocket and brought out a small velvet box. Ella blinked, her heart skipping. "Adrian, what's that?" He opened it slowly. Inside was not a grand diamond or an expensive jewel, but a simple silver ring with a tiny crystal shaped like a teardrop. "It belonged to my mother," he said softly. "She used to wear it when she worked. She said it reminded her that beauty doesn't need to shout to be seen." Ella's breath caught. "Adrian, I can't—" He stopped her gently. "I'm not asking for forever. Not yet," he said, his voice calm and sincere. "I'm asking for today. A promise that we'll keep walking this path together, wherever it leads." Her eyes filled with tears. "But we come from such different worlds. People will talk. They'll never understand." He smiled faintly. "Then let them talk. They've been talking all my life, Ella. For once, I'd rather live my truth than their expectations." The honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. "Hadrian," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Are you sure?" He nodded, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I've never been more sure of anything. You didn't fall in love with my money, my title, or my name. You saw the man who still misses his mother's song. That's the part of me no one else ever cared to see." A single tear slipped down Ella's cheek. She smiled through it. "Then yes," she said softly. "Yes to today." Adrian stood and walked around the table, gently sliding the silver ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had waited all its life to rest there. When she looked up, his eyes were shining. "You've given me something I didn't know I'd lost," he said quietly. "What's that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Peace," he replied, "and the courage to love again." Outside, the rain slowed, and a ray of moonlight slipped through the clouds. It fell across their joined hands like a quiet blessing. That night, two hearts that had once lived in separate worlds found a bridge between them, built not by wealth, but by kindness, gratitude, and a love that asked for nothing in return. Morning arrived with a soft golden glow that spilled through Ella's window. She sat up slowly, the silver ring on her finger catching the sunlight. It shimmered quietly, not loud or boastful, but gentle, just like the man who had given it to her. Her small room, once a place of silence and solitude, now felt alive. The golden shoebox still sat on her bedside table, untouched since the night Adrian had given it to her. She smiled faintly and whispered, "Maybe today." She untied the ribbon carefully, her hands trembling with emotion. Inside lay the cream-colored shoes she had once only admired through glass. They were more beautiful than she remembered, soft, elegant, and full of meaning. Ella held them close to her chest and whispered, "You're not just shoes anymore. You're a reminder that dreams can find their way home." After breakfast, she dressed simply, a soft white dress that fluttered gently with each movement. She slipped the shoes on. They fit perfectly, as though made for her. Then she stepped outside. The city was alive as always. Cars rushing, people moving, the world spinning fast. But today, Ella didn't walk with her head down. For the first time, she walked with her shoulders straight, her steps light and confident. The same street where she used to stop and dream was now the street where she walked, living that dream. As she passed Maison Leclerc, she stopped for a moment. The glass still shone, displaying new shoes and dresses. She smiled softly at her reflection. Not the tired girl in old sneakers anymore, but a woman who had learned that worth isn't defined by wealth, but by heart. A sleek black car slowed beside her. The window rolled down, and Adrian leaned out, smiling. "You wore them," he said, his voice warm. She laughed lightly. "You told me to walk like the world noticed me. I'm trying." He stepped out of the car, taking her hand. "You're doing more than trying, Ella. You're reminding the world that kindness still exists." They began walking together down the same street where they had first seen each other. Not a billionaire and a cleaner anymore, but two souls bound by something far deeper than money. People turned to look at them, whispering. But Ella didn't care. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. At the corner of the street, Adrian stopped and said quietly, "My mother used to say, the best journeys begin with a single step in the right direction." Ella squeezed his hand and smiled. "Then let's keep walking." As they moved forward, hand in hand, the city seemed to glow brighter around them. A poor girl who once admired a shoe she couldn't afford had found more than a gift. She had found love, dignity, and a reminder that miracles don't always arrive in riches. Sometimes they walk quietly beside you, wearing the same shoes as your dreams. Life doesn't always bring two souls together by chance, but by purpose. She only wanted to admire a shoe, but what she found was a reminder that kindness still exists, and love doesn't always arrive with diamonds or gold. Ella didn't just find a pair of shoes. She found her worth, her confidence, and the courage to walk her own path, one step at a time. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments, and let us know where in the world you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to Folk Tales by Olivia for more emotional, dramatic, and unforgettable stories. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and keep watching.